Awesome. So we can get started now. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Jahnavi, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at the Internatus Business Club of New Jersey, also commonly referred to as IBC NJ. I'm also a junior at John P. Stevens High School in Edison, New Jersey. On behalf of all of our partners and other affiliates, I'd like to welcome everyone to Digital Strategy Consultant with Michelle Fang, the first of our signature speaker series of 2021 here at IBC New Jersey. Today, I'm honored to have Michelle Fang, who will be sharing more about her experiences in the business field. However, a couple of things before we do begin. Should any of you members find yourself curious or unaware about anything we discussed throughout the duration of the event, please direct any and all of your questions to Jeremy Slaten in the chat, who will be conducting the final Q&A session towards the end of the event. Also, for those of you who might be tuning in online, the Internatus Business Club, or IBC, is a national not-for-profit collection of business clubs consisting of emerging student leaders with a common goal of providing value to society. IBC members have access to selective networking events, workshops, and quarterly business forums, as well as exclusive scholarships, internships at select partners across the country, and community initiatives. For more information, feel free to check out internatus.org. And so without further ado, let me introduce Michelle Fang, who will then go more into her experiences afterwards. She attended William & Mary at the Raymond A. Mason School of Business, where she got her Bachelor of Business Administration and Finance and Bachelor of Arts in Economics. As for her experiences, Michelle works as an associate consultant at IBM, specifically in the communication sector. Additionally, she's a chief marketing officer at DiveChat and is also currently a freelance writer at Medium. I'll pass it over to Michelle now, but before I do, as a reminder, if you have any questions, please direct them to Jeremy Slaten in the chat for the final Q&A session.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the intro, Jahnavi, and thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to chat with everyone. So a bit more about myself. I do digital strategy consulting at IBM, specifically IBM iX in their New York office, which is their digital agency and one of the largest networks in the world. I focus on digital transformation and customer experience across clients in the communication sector. So happy to clarify, more of what that means. During quarantine, I also got heavily involved in a startup. So I've been spending the past year with them building an app and brand catered to communities and college students, just to help people stay more connected during this pandemic. We launched our public beta back in August last year, and we hit top 100 in social networking on the US App Store on our first day. So it's a very exciting, milestone even during COVID. And then again, as Jahnavi said on the side, just for fun, I really like writing. In this past year, I've been taking it a bit more seriously and publishing articles more in the startup digital marketing space, and specifically to Gen Z, just as a way to give back and share more with the world what I've learned through my experiences. I also graduated class of 2020, so the COVID class. So I'm still, pretty young and new to the game. Also happy to talk anything about, college decisions, life at college, and beyond. And I think like in college, one of the most important lessons that, I've learned and have taken with me into more, I guess, the real business world, is really just, when you're thinking about your professional development, your decisions in terms of what classes you want to take, what major you want to be, is really, it requires a lot of introspection and self-awareness, but also, being open to exploration and figuring out what works and what doesn't work for you. I know the audience here is a lot in high school and still kind of early on figuring out what direction you want to go in. I'd say I see a lot of people come into college with a direction and an end goal, which is, totally awesome if that's you. But even if you don't have that level of clarity, I think college is the perfect time for you to figure out what's important for you in a career, what values and what missions you want to embody with the people around you. And I think, I was very lucky in terms of being able to come across, a job at IBM that really aligned with, my interests, my, things that made me passionate. I'm a huge fan of design thinking and human-centered design, which is something that IBM is very, very big on. So, happy to chat more about that. So I don't know if you wanted to have any questions come in right now, any part of, specifically of my experience that we wanted to chat more about or hear more about, I'm open to that. So, yeah, if there's any, questions. I can also talk a bit more about just like my college experience and more how, I ended up with where I am today. Because I know it seems like a lot of the audience today is more in like the high school phase, and really starting, like I mentioned, to think about what's important for you in a career. So for me, I started out, very bullheaded on marketing. I was someone that did a lot of creative things and thought that marketing was a really great kind of marriage between the creative side and the business angle. And, ended up majoring in finance. And the whole story behind that was, I took my first marketing class in college. And we were memorizing vocabulary, essentially learning what the four P's were, price, product, etc. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is not the type of marketing that I wanted to spend my education on. I think what really resonated with me in marketing was being able to, interact with people, be on the ground, speak to audiences, and understand what would resonate with people. And so for me, kind of at a crossroads in terms of not being able to, fully commit myself to a marketing major, I did what was logical and I chose another major in business. So I landed on finance. And what I really loved about finance was being able to take kind of ambiguous real world situations, putting them into models, being quantitative, being a critical thinker, um, and really being able to take concepts to a more quantitative model. And so when I was starting to look at internships and recruit for, jobs, I really, took a lot of self reflection and awareness, kind of what I mentioned in the very beginning, and saw that consulting is a very, very, all encompassing industry where, at the same time of working with people, working in teams, you're also solving challenges, really using a analytical and critical mindset to take some of the most ambiguous and challenging problems that clients are facing and turning them into models and recommendations that will ultimately help their business. So kind of a lot of it was taking all of my interests and combining them into a position that made sense for me. And so I did a consulting internship back, in the summer of 2019. I interned at, a financial and accounting services firm. If you guys have heard of PwC, I interned in their public sector. Really, really enjoyed the internship, really fell in love with consulting, and it was definitely, the right path for me. But, I did learn that I wanted more on the commercial end. So being able to kind of dip my toes and work across various different dynamic commercial challenges, and also something that was more encompassing of my creative side. While finance is definitely a very exciting, place to be, I definitely wanted, something that incorporated, again, my interest in human-centered design, design thinking. And then kind of what I did was on LinkedIn, when I was looking for my full-time job on LinkedIn, I just kind of went down the list of, my alumni, sent everyone I saw a personalized LinkedIn message saying, "Hi, my name's Michelle. I'm an undergrad at William and Mary. I'm interested in what you're doing at XYZ company." And kind of, just took calls with them. My library had like these rooms that were like individual and you could rent them out. And so what I would do is just kind of rent them for weeks straight and just take call after call. And I think like, for anyone that's really thinking about where they want to go in their career and kind of what's out there for them, even within consulting, there's so many different types of consulting, like mergers and acquisition, human capital, digital strategy, what I'm doing today. And so I just took call after call and really learned from the people that were chatting with me. And I think that's the best way to, hear more about a ton of different careers without actually, stepping into it. Of course, experience is, the most valuable way of learning what you like and what you don't like. Um, and then, ended up being really lucky and came across IBM. They had an opening at the time and ended up interviewing. I absolutely loved every single person that I interacted with during the interview process. And I think that's pretty telling whenever you're, considering a new like college, a new course, a new situation, a new internship, whatever it might be, is that the people is the most important part. Because, I'm going to tell you that work is always going to be work. There are days where you're doing the most exciting part where, that's what you signed up for, that's what excites you. But then there are also going to be days where you're doing kind of the work that isn't the most fun, or they're going to be long hours or long days. And at the core is you want to be around people that uplift you and excite you and create an environment where you can be kind of genuinely yourself. And so I highly encourage anyone that, when you're looking at new opportunities, new situations, new environments, to really put the people first, because that is what's going to kind of uplift you and take you through that whole situation. And so, even starting virtually, I started my job during quarantine. That has made the transition so like seamless, is because, from day one, the people that were around me when I was interviewing, I knew that it was a situation and environment that I wanted to be in. And so the culture, definitely fit. And, I've been very much enjoying my time ever since. So just kind of, sharing a bit more about like what I've learned and the advice that I wish I definitely knew a lot earlier, especially, kind of thinking about something as ambiguous as what, a future career would look like. And kind of another thing too is that, no one is ever tied down to one internship or one, job position. I know like going throughout high school, I went to JP Stevens as well. Going through college, like it was very, very easy to, compare yourself to other people, think that, oh, why am I not in that position? Or I want to be where that person is. As well as a lot of imposter syndrome, feeling like I wasn't the right fit or wasn't good enough to be in a position that I was at. I think, after college and, especially now being post grad for almost a year now, I feel like everyone kind of goes their own ways, does what is personal and passionate for them. And I think that's the most important part to just keep in mind, is that, even if you don't land a internship or you land a job or even go to the college that you wanted to be at, right from the beginning, there's always opportunities to change and to discover, what really is meaningful for you. Like, is it a position that you really want? Is it a position that is meant for you too? Both from like a perspective of, you being passionate about it and you being a good fit. So, um, again, happy to answer any questions or talk about, any part of my journey that might be of interest, or just kind of any overall advice I'm happy to share. And I love, helping, and a lot of the advice that I wish I had gotten a lot earlier is definitely something that I want to be giving to everyone.
All right, so hi, I'll actually be leading the audience Q&A today. My name is Jeremy Slaten. I'm a junior at the Berg County Academies in the Academy for Business and Finance and the Vice President of IBC New Jersey. So to echo everybody, thank you to our speaker as well as our members for coming. And we already have some audience questions. So the first question comes from Rachel, and she asks, how would you describe your work experience at IBM?
Yeah, of course. So just to reiterate, I do digital strategy consulting at IBM. And I was also in a pretty unique situation, again, starting virtually and never having, set foot in the actual office. So I work on the consulting end of IBM. And what that means is, of course, IBM is a very tech heavy company. They do a lot of products, software, AI, machine learning, all the buzzwords. But the thing is, you can't just expect a company to, purchase those solutions and understand how to use it, how to implement it in their specific business. So my kind of role comes in where I'm acting as the bridge between the developers, the designers, the coders, the people actually making that product, and the client, who has their own business solutions, business challenges, and business use case. So just to give kind of an example, one of our clients was looking to increase their engagement of their mobile app. So they wanted their users to, use it more, spend more time on the app, discover new ways to, incorporate it in their lifestyle. And so what we did as the IBM team, we brought AI to the app, and we kind of advised them on how to implement AI. Where does it make the most sense? We were on the ground talking to customers and seeing where AI could help out. So again, my role is, pretty exciting, especially with COVID and everything going virtual, that there's such a huge demand for every company basically to reimagine the way that they're interacting with customers online and digitally. But I guess also more on the people and culture side, I think IBM is a really great place to start your career because it is a very huge company. There are so many different resources out there for any position. The other day I wanted to do like an Adobe course, and there were like 5 million Adobe courses that I could do. So it's a really great in terms of that aspect. I think the people, especially, on the consulting end, and I'm sure, IBM overall, everyone's really young and everyone's really, really driven. And just being surrounded in that environment has also made me more curious, more passionate, more empathetic. And so I've really, really enjoyed my time at IBM so far. It's definitely, the consulting end, I think, is not something that a lot of people talk much about, but highly recommend, taking a look and kind of just seeing the type of work that we do because it is very exciting and very, future focused, which is very exciting to say the least.
All right. Our next question comes from Elizabeth, and she asks, what activities did you do in high school that attracted you to business?
Yeah, that's a good question. It feels like such a long time ago, but it's only been 4 years. I remember in high school, I think where my interest in business came from was more of the classes. So I took like AP micro and macro economics. I took like the business classes that they offered at JP Stevens. So there was like global business. And again, it's been a while, so I don't really remember the exact terms. But I think like for me, I did a lot of business courses that really, taught me kind of the foundations and the fundamentals of understanding, what business even meant. And then I remember I was also in FBLA, which was also a really great organization to, just be surrounded by people that were, also interested in business. And it's pretty wide encompassing. But if you're someone that is like looking to understand more about business, would highly recommend, seeing what courses you can take in high school, what electives there are, even, going online and looking at webinars or online courses. The most great thing about the pandemic, I think, is that it's connected all these different opportunities and events virtually that we traditionally wouldn't have access to. I can hop on a call or a webinar with, I don't know, like California people that, traditionally would have only kind of conglomerated in California. So definitely take advantage of that. And, if there's any specific resources that I come across that would be helpful for high schoolers, I can definitely send them along. But for me, I think it was a lot of the courses that I took that really gave me the foundation to think about it a lot more.
All right. So our next question comes from Brianna, or yes. And they ask, what is your favorite thing about working in the business industry?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I'm someone that loves being around people. I think that's, something that really energizes me. I love collaborating. I love working in teams, and, kind of working together as a team to solve exciting challenges. And I think in the business world, everything is so focused on relationships and teamwork and, working with people that it was just an environment that really energized me. And so, every day, even during quarantine, I'm always on like Zoom calls and talking with people and talking with my team members. And that for one personally has kept me sane, just having, social interaction on a daily basis. But, secondly, I think it's just like very awesome to, bring teams and bring diverse talent together to create better solutions for tomorrow. And I think that's the biggest draw for me in, working in business.
All right. Our next question is, how did your experiences in college as a finance major help you apply to specific positions of interest post-graduation?
Yeah, so kind of a bit more about the finance major, compared to kind of the rest of business. I think finance is very, very technical and very kind of structured and analytical compared to, let's say, like marketing or entrepreneurship. I think finance teaches you a lot of the basic terms and, information that you would need to kind of address business fundamentally. So things like, again, like gross profit, revenue, cost of goods sold, you kind of learn that and really develop a fundamental understanding of how a business operates. So any business out there has to have, their finances sorted out, or else they're not sustainable. So just kind of like an overall context for, the finance major specifically. And I think for me, I was someone that definitely wanted to go the more creative consulting route. And I really saw finance as a very tangible, technical, and fundamental skill to have. Because, if I tell someone that I majored in finance, they know and can piece together exactly what I learned. Finance is also very Excel heavy. And even if you're not working in finance, I'm sure and I'm guaranteeing that you'll be working in Excel in any business situation or position. So I think like for me, finance really taught me a lot of the basic foundational technical skills that, even if I'm not using in my day to day, or if I'm not, pulling out these finance terms, it gives me a really, really good, mindset to understand both the creative side and the fun, marketing campaign, digital strategy, but also grounding that in, okay, we're selling this, project to a client. What is our gross profit? Let's calculate our cost rates. It's something that grounds every single business. And I think like when I was recruiting too, it's just always great to show that you have technical skills, and you have that mindset to think critically, to think in a very structured manner, because that is what companies are looking for when they're hiring young talent. They want to see that you can think structurally, that you can take situations and circumstances and put them into a model, so that you can make better decisions for the future. So if anyone is thinking about majoring in finance, I think it's a really, really great way to gain those skills. A lot of people that do major in finance end up going, either the investment banking route, they go the corporate finance route, or they go financial consulting. But there's a ton of people like me that also go different routes of, entrepreneurship or venture capital, or, something completely different. So I think it's a really great way to build foundational skills that are tangible and technical.
All right. So our next question comes from Erin. And Erin asks, how has your experience been as a woman in business/finance, and how have you had to overcome some of those stereotypes in such a male-dominated field?
Yeah, no, that's such an awesome question. And I think, like, personally, women in business is also something that I align myself with, whether it be like volunteering in organizations or just participating in the right, discussions. Again, it is, 2021, and I think everyone is very hyper aware of, diversity, equality, especially for a company like IBM that is super huge and, employs a lot of females. It's definitely something that's been top of mind. Also a very relevant question because I think this month is Women's Month. So, and for me, I think like it definitely felt kind of, it was definitely a very interesting experience being a female, because it did feel like at some points I had to kind of compensate or overcompensate for areas that traditionally men were a bit better at. So, for instance, confidence was a huge thing. Having to kind of tell myself that I had to project to be more confident, that I had to project to be more, knowledgeable in certain ways, especially when it came to like finance classes. That, you look around and there's only a few females and a lot of males. And again, I think investment banking is also a industry that's very male dominated, and I personally don't have much experience in. I think with consulting, it does, tend to skew a bit more male heavy. But in my personal experience, I think the biggest thing when, you do feel like you are affected, or you do feel like there is that, innate bias, is really finding your allies, and finding people that, are also females in, business, or also females in finance, that you can really support each other, and collaborate together. especially like at IBM and even at my startup, we have groups just for females to, share tips, collaborate, and uplift each other. So it really just comes down to, who are your allies? Can you find them? And how can you support each other? Having relevant conversations in the workplace is also very important. I'm very lucky that at IBM, having those discussions, having those events and webinars are, at the forefront of our kind of employee education. And there are different groups, sometimes called, business resource groups or employee resource groups that are specific to, supporting and giving the right resources to women. Um, and then lastly, I'll say is that like I've also been very lucky from the angle of, my past two projects that I've been on at IBM have been a team of all females, which is kind of rare, but also really great to see. And I think like we're, very tight, very casual with each other, and really great to, just have a team that's all females. And we're still, delivering the same value. We're still delivering the same success metrics for the company. So, when you are looking at colleges, when you're looking at organizations or companies that, you're interested in, definitely pay attention to the environment that you're in and, understand that there are going to be strong networks and strong support networks because it is such a widely discussed, topic. But yeah, I mean, it all comes down to finding your allies and the support is there. You just have to go and, find it and participate in it.
All right. So what has your experience been joining a startup while a student? How is the work-life balance?
Yeah. So for more context, I joined Dive in March of 2020. So right when the pandemic hit and right when, school started to transition to purely online. And, I got a lot of my time back because I was involved with a lot of organizations on campus. I was doing, a part-time internship, and just being involved with that campus life. Of course, also social time, hanging out with friends. And because of the pandemic, a lot of, that end and that aspect kind of died down. Since, we had traditionally organized ourselves around in-person events and in-person, meetings, etc. So that gave me actually a lot of time to focus on, doing startup stuff and, getting involved on that front. I will say that, being in a startup is definitely very, demanding. I'm sure you might have heard of, the long hours and, quite frankly, joining a startup has also felt like a time warp. Like there's just so much happening all the time. You're like constantly putting out fires. And so it definitely feels like, even when the month pass, it's, so quick. But, to answer the question more specifically, I think, for me, it was easy because, being able to just, switch between classes and my startup stuff, all from like the comfort of my laptop and being at home, and just having that extra time, you know, not being in clubs and organizations. So that really helped me kind of balance everything. I mean, I also remember like when it came around time for finals, it was definitely a challenge being able to balance studying and keeping up with friends with the work that I was doing. So, for anyone out there that's interested in kind of being an entrepreneur, getting involved with a startup as a student, I think the biggest, benefit of being at a startup is that they typically are very flexible around your working style and your working schedule. It's not a 9 to 5, you show up and then you get to go home set schedule. Because even if you are in classes or even if you're doing, other commitments, you can always kind of work your schedule around those time blocks as long as, you're getting your work done. I think in the startup world, it also depends, on your team as well. I think my team was also very trusting and didn't care if I was online like every single minute of the day. It was more so like if you can get your work done, if you can hit the metrics or, say or fulfill what you said you could do by that time, like that's what matters. So really kind of knowing what your working schedule is like, understanding when you work best and blocking those hours out. It also does come down to a lot of like time management, productivity, One thing that I really like doing is time blocking my day. So, looking at my day in 30, 45, 60-minute segments, and dedicating time, even if I don't have a meeting or, a class during that time, kind of setting those time blocks to be, okay, like for this 1 hour, I'm going to be focusing on this. And also trying to group things that are pretty similar together. So, to reduce contact switching, because you actually lose a lot of productivity switching in between, classes and then startup and then classes and startup. So sometimes, what you can do is have a few days of the week where you're purely just focusing on school, not touching the startup, and then the other days really focusing on your startup so that you are really focused on that one thing and you don't have to, spend your energies flipping in between. So again, it's, definitely doable. Startups are very flexible around what hours you work. And especially, while we're still in this remote environment, there's a lot of opportunities that you can kind of balance and pursue. And again, it just comes down to what works best for you, what productivity methods work best for you, and how you, personally manage your time.
All right, so we actually have another question from Rachel, and she asked, what advice would you give to a student trying to choose their major for college?
Yeah, and I, was just talking about my whole journey to picking my major. And I think, sometimes it depends on kind of what you want to do with that major. So let's say you're someone that wants to be in business, wants to end up in, investment banking or consulting, you know, they typically want to see majors in finance or economics or, business in general. So really think about, okay, what are the types of things that, bring me excitement that, look at your day to day. What are the things that you kind of lose your time in, also called flow state? I think those types of activities and those tasks are really telling of what's exciting to you, what you're passionate about, and what you can see yourself, spending more time in. I know also in high school, you might not be exposed to all the different, areas that you can study. So highly recommend, in your first year of college, to, take classes in all dimensions, to, take classes that you might not have thought you would, and just see, if you're enjoying it. If you're not, you can always drop the class. I've definitely seen so many of my friends kind of sign up for a class one day and drop it the next. Because again, college is all about like exploration, trying things out and experiencing to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And I think what you don't like is also very important to understand and to use as, a way to guide your decision process. And, I know that also sometimes when you're applying for colleges that they ask you to list a major that you want to apply for. So even, thinking about in high school, like what made you the most excited, maybe a club that you joined that you really enjoy in, socioeconomic, challenges, things like that. Like really just be self, aware and, think about, what makes you excited and what you're passionate about and what your story is. So, I told you guys mine about how I started out in marketing, didn't want to have a very, memorizing vocab kind of education. And so I sought different ways to find a technical, tangible background. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of, figuring out your major is that people change like 5 million times. Like I'm not the only one to kind of go out and about. I also like thought I was going to do psychology at some point and I took my first class. I failed it and it was absolutely terrible. So, people change all the time. And never feel like, you need to have everything figured out or you need to lock things in and after that it's final. Like I always say, college is a time for exploration. Try things that you wouldn't normally do. Try, an African history class. I took a Jewish autobiography class and I'm, completely far away from English. So, if anything, it teaches you about yourself, what you like, what you don't like. And, always just know that in the end, things always work out. Your major is important, but it's not the tell all be all. And you can always find other opportunities outside of school to pursue what you're interested in, or, involve yourself in relevant communities that bring you excitement. So I know there's a lot of pressure to, figure it out and, have everything kind of lined up, but also know at the same time that it is just exploration and being open to different things, and following your heart and being genuine to yourself. I hope that helps.
So what made you choose William and Mary, and what did you think of your experience there?
Yeah, so I know not that many people might have heard of William and Mary, but it is a pretty small, I think we're like 6 to 8,000 students. And for context, I went to JP Stevens and that itself was like 5,000 people. So very, very, it was pretty on the small end. It's a small, traditional liberal arts school in, colonial Williamsburg, which is like the historic reenactment, think American US history, that part of Virginia. It's also like the second oldest college in the US, so like right after Harvard. And the way that I came to William and Mary was actually pretty funny. A lot of like what my parents had kind of researched and told me and kind of guided me, I followed. So I applied to a ton of different schools. And William and Mary was just kind of on the list that my parents wanted me to look at. And of course, being me, being, the good child I thought I was, I followed and I applied, and I ended up getting waitlisted. I had actually, committed to Northeastern, prior to that. I thought that I wanted to be in a huge city like Boston and, explore business on that end. And then I got off the wait list. I visited William and Mary, and I think the one thing that struck out to me the most, even though, it was in this very quiet, small town, very colonial, historic reenactment-esque, was the people. And, I mentioned it before, the people are very, very telling of your experience and the environment. The people at William and Mary really loved education, and they really loved and were very passionate about what they wanted to study, which was something that was, pretty new to me. I thought, like, wow, like this is so awesome that people value their education so much. And it was a very, welcoming, empathetic, and kind environment. And so when I went to William and Mary, it was also really nice, because a lot of people from JP, my high school, didn't go to William and Mary. So it felt like I, had a fresh beginning. I had something where I could start over and really, understand who I was. And so my experience, was really, really great. I think, William and Mary is a really unique environment where people are so kind and so genuine. Part of it is also, again, Southern hospitality. That's a really huge thing. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed my experience. And I think when people are looking at colleges, also pay attention to the location of that college, because, the university is very, very plugged into the local city, the local environment, and so will you. So for instance, more on a personal level, like if you're looking for something that's exciting, a city, something big, with a lot of things happening, of course, William and Mary might not be the school for you. And then from a professional perspective, a lot of William and Mary students end up, interning or finding jobs in the Washington, D.C. area or the local Virginia area. And for me, coming from New Jersey, I kind of wanted to be, I wanted a job that was closer to home. And I wanted to be in New York. But William and Mary might not have been the most, accommodating environment for that, because everyone kind of went into the DC, Virginia ecosystem. So definitely just kind of, an advice from my end is, when you are looking at colleges and where you want to go, also think about the ecosystem and the location that you're entering yourself in. Just an example, if you go to, I don't know, like Stanford, you bet that you're going to be very plugged into the startup Silicon Valley tech world, because that's where it's located in, compared to, let's say, Virginia and the DC area. But I also see people that transfer after their first year out of college, and that's also totally normal. Again, going along the huge theme of exploration and being open to different options. But again, like, be true to yourself. Think about what environments you would be genuine in, environments that you would enjoy, and follow that. I mean, I think that's more telling than any type of, US ranking numbers or metrics or things that people publicize on the media. Go, and I know it's also a little difficult to visit and experience it for yourself, but talk to people that go to that school, find people on LinkedIn or on the internet, and ask them how their experience have been. They'll give you, a truthful and honest reflection. And I think that'll also be very helpful when you're looking at different colleges and, trying to kind of navigate where you want to go.
So how has your experience writing affected your career choices?
Yeah, so I've always liked writing. I just enjoy kind of putting thoughts to paper and creating stories and telling, information to kind of audiences. I picked up writing more as freelance kind of lately, and I write, as I mentioned, a lot in the startup world, digital marketing, Gen Z. It's a very, exciting place to be. The biggest thing with writing is that if you publicize it, if you share it with people, it really builds your personal brand, and how people see you. So for me, I kind of identified the specific niche that I'm very interested in and that I could write, a lot about, which is, digital marketing, startup, Gen Z. And so the more that I write, I think the more that I'm establishing myself as someone that's knowledgeable in this space. I'm growing my personal brand as someone that has a lot to think about, that has a lot to say in this area. And so for anyone that, might be interested in writing or kind of developing a personal brand, I think it really depends on, your niche. And a lot of my niche comes from the work that I'm doing. So, at IBM, I'm doing a lot with like marketing and branding. With Dive, I'm also doing very much the same, in a startup, very fast paced, innovation field, specific to our generation, Gen Z. And so they work really hand in hand because what I'm learning at work, I'm thinking about and putting in my perspectives and mindsets into my writing, which also helps me, develop myself and position myself as someone in this industry. So it really helps, with personal branding. And even if it's something that isn't one to one with your work or one to one with business, even writing about sports or writing about a passion of yours. I know a friend who like writes about cooking and his recipes. Like those are all great things that show, even in an application or internship, that you're human and that you have these interests and you're growing your personal brand as someone that is knowledgeable about these topics.
All right. So what is your advice for the college admissions process?
Oh, okay. That's also a really good question. And I'm sure many of you guys are already or going to be embarking on that process. I think the biggest advice, I wish I also had when I was going through the process is that it's all going to be okay. You're going to end up in a place that matches you and your values and what you're interested in. So back in high school, I know I was such a huge kind of compare. I would always like compare myself and feel envy of people that got into really top name, top brand colleges, and thought to myself like, why couldn't I also end up there? And the thing is, I realized that even if I did get into those schools, even if I did attend those schools, I probably would not even enjoy myself. I don't think that would be an environment that I would wholeheartedly, enjoy and be passionate about. And college is such a defining, few years of your life that, even when you're going through the admission process and, getting rejections, be okay with that because rejection is redirection to a place that was meant for you. And I know rejection and the whole college admission process is very tearing and toiling at kind of your personal, self-worth and your perception of that. But also know that sometimes when you do get rejected from a college, it doesn't do anything in terms of your personal worth or your candidacy. Sometimes even similarly in the internship and job search process, it's just a matter of it's not the right time or it's not the right fit. And that rejection will put you in the right direction to something that was totally meant for you or even better for you. So just a, advice for those that might be going through the process or are going to go through that process is, don't take it too hard. It's never anything personal. You're going to end up in the right place that was meant for you and that you'll enjoy. And everything will always work out in the end.
All right, we are closing in on time, so we'll wrap it up here. For all of our members, more information about our future events will be provided soon through Slack. And for those of you who are tuning in online who may be interested in becoming a member of IBC, please check out any of our national chapters at internatus.org/apply. I want to take a moment to thank all of you guys for coming, and a big thank you to Michelle for taking time out of her day to speak for us. It was very insightful, especially for me, and hopefully all of our members as well. It was just great speaking about you and learning more about your experiences. And with that said, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend here.